Catherine Williams never imagined that her silent acts of compassion would one day resonate with such power. For 7 long years she secretly fed a poor black boy behind the restaurant, until her jealous supervisor framed her and got her fired. Broken, forgotten, she gave the boy one last bag of food with her address tucked inside, hoping he would survive. 10 years of silence passed, until one autumn evening a dark vehicle stopped in front of her run-down home. When the person got out, she remained frozen. The child she had rescued had returned, and what he revealed would change her life. Before we begin, if this is your first time visiting one of our videos, don't hesitate to subscribe. Your support is invaluable. It allows us to offer you more powerful and moving stories. Stay with us until the end. And if this story moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it on to someone close to you. The restaurant smelled of burnt coffee and bacon grease. Every morning the walls still held the aroma of stale alcohol, the red vinyl booths cracked by decades, the hum of conversations mixed with the clatter of dishes. For most, it was just a place to grab a cheap breakfast before work. But for Catherine Williams, a 60-year-old waitress with silver hair pulled into a bun, it was her entire world. She moved with quiet precision, filling cups, balancing trays, offering tired smiles, even when her legs ached. Most customers barely noticed her except when their order was late. But Catherine had a secret ritual after every shift. At the end of the day, she would go out the back entrance, clutching in her palms a small paper bag, sometimes leftovers, sometimes something she had quietly bought with her tips. She would walk down the alley, her shoes scraping the asphalt to the edge of the dumpster where a boy was always waiting. He couldn't have been more than 8 when she first saw him. Dark skin, big eyes heavy with hunger, clothes too thin to face the cold. He never begged, never pleaded. He just stood there, shifting from foot to foot, arms crossed as if protecting himself from the world. The first time she hesitated. But when she handed him a sandwich wrapped in paper, he looked at her with more than gratitude. It was disbelief, as if kindness seemed stranger to him than hunger. Thus began this ritual. Day after day, year after year, Catherine brought him food. She didn't press him with questions, didn't try to know his story. She just gave him a slice of pie when there was some left, soup when it was cold, a carton of milk when she could afford it. Gradually, other employees noticed. "You're wasting good food on a vagrant," whispered a cook, shaking his head. "You'll regret it," murmured another waitress. "Those kids never forget who helped them." Catherine pretended not to hear, but their words were like small cuts, stinging her heart before she buried them deep inside. Still, she continued. She began slipping napkins with little notes, a smiling face, a "stay warm," sometimes just his first name, Julian, which he had whispered to her so softly she had barely heard, but she never repeated it to anyone. It was their secret. In the rain, she protected the bread in her pocket. On burning summer evenings, she froze water bottles so he would have something cold, and even when her hands shook with arthritis, she prepared that paper bag, walking down the alley as if this ritual was what kept her standing. After 7 years the boy had grown, his frame had filled out, but his eyes, they still carried the same weight. He would nod, sometimes sketch half a smile. Words remained rare. The silence between them wasn't heavy, it was survival. And yet, in that silence, she saw him, really saw him. Not as a homeless black kid, not as a forgotten child, but as someone who mattered. Catherine didn't know it then, but every bag of food was a seed planted. While so many others passed him without seeing, she stopped, she noticed, she cared. The whispers at the restaurant became more insistent. Some mocked her kindness, others rolled their eyes. 7 years, you think you're a saint. They laughed behind her back, but Catherine didn't care. Long ago she had understood that the smallest gestures, repeated faithfully, were the strongest prayers. So she continued walking through that back door, a warm paper bag in her hands, never imagining how much it would matter one day. The restaurant office smelled of cold cigarettes and cheap cologne. Behind the desk sat Mr. Martinez, the manager, thick mustache, hair slicked with too much gel and that sneer that never reached his eyes. He watched people as if they were just interchangeable parts, never humans. Martinez saw everything, and lately he saw Catherine, not her tired feet or aching back, but the way she left with bags after closing, too often, too discreetly. He began dropping remarks when no one was listening. "Funny how food disappears after shifts," he murmured one evening, his eyes narrowed. Catherine pretended to busy herself stacking plates. But those words weighed heavy, the whispers from colleagues didn't help. "She's stealing pies," snickered a cook. "No," replied a waitress, lowering her voice. "I saw her feeding that street kid again. So the boss isn't going to like that. If he finds out she's wasting inventory, it's like stealing." Catherine heard. Her hands tightened on the coffee pot, but she remained silent. One Friday night, the storm broke. The register showed $40 missing. Martinez gathered the staff, pacing in front of them like a wolf, ready to strike. His voice was too soft. "Someone took money, and I don't need to guess who." Eyes turned toward Catherine. Her stomach knotted. Martinez pointed his finger. You go out with bags every night. Everyone's seen it. Don't play innocent." Her chest tightened. Her voice trembled. "Those are leftovers, not money. I never touched the register." But Martinez cut her off, mocking. "You think the boss cares about your stories? You're done." A heavy silence invaded the restaurant, crueler than any insult. A young busboy whispered to his neighbor near the door. "She's worked here longer than all of us. They can't just throw her out like that." "They just did," replied the other. "Martinez always wanted to get rid of her." Catherine stood frozen. The room spinning around her, she wanted to scream, defend herself, demand proof. But years of swallowing her pride kept her tongue tied. That night, she left. Her steps in the alley echoed heavier than ever. The boy was waiting, shoulders hunched against the cold. He looked up, expecting the familiar bag. Her hands trembled as she handed it to him. Inside, more than food, a folded napkin, stained by her tears. It read, "I don't work here anymore, accused of things I didn't do, but if you ever need help, here's where I live." Her address, written in shaky handwriting. Julian took the bag, stared at her longer than usual. His lips parted as if he was going to speak, but no sound came out. He only nodded, clutched the bag against him, and disappeared into the night. Catherine stayed in the alley long after he left, the cold cutting through her coat, her body drained. She had nothing left, no job, no security, no certainty, only the faint hope that one day the boy would remember that address. But weeks became months, and months became years. No one ever came knocking at her door, and Catherine learned the cruelest lesson of kindness. Sometimes you give everything, and it disappears into silence. The winters passed first, the ones that bite through wool and find bone. Catherine learned to layer 2 pairs of socks, a vest under her coat, a scarf tucked in to block the wind. In the morning, the air smelled of menthol and bleach. She took small cleaning jobs, scrubbing other people's lives to pay for her own. On her knees scrubbing baseboards, she would pause, stretch her aching hands, then resume. Her house remained modest, clean, painted a faded blue, with a porch that creaked like an old friend. On the fridge, tucked under a pie-shaped magnet, rested a folded napkin, bearing her address, written in her own hand. She didn't need that reminder, but she kept it, a promise to herself. If a knock came one day, she would hear it. Neighbors came and went, like the seasons, new faces, new cars, new sounds. Sometimes 2 teenagers lingered in front of her fence. "That's Miss Catherine," whispered one, "the former waitress with her shopping bag. She used to feed a kid behind the restaurant every day. Amazing, right?" "Whatever," said the other. "People forget. I bet the kid did too." Their voices faded as she passed. She waved and continued on her way. She still noticed the small things, a stray cat that wouldn't let itself be petted, the bus driver who hummed off-key, a newspaper headline about a young founder raising millions. Names and numbers sliding over her like rain on a window. She didn't read the business pages. Coupons were more useful. In the evening, she made light tea, listened to the radiator hiss, and watched headlights paint moving squares on the ceiling. On Sundays, she helped at the church food bank, stacking cans in neat pyramids. The pastor's wife had tried more than once to slip money into her hand. Catherine would smile, close the woman's fingers around the bills, and nod toward an overwhelmed mother with twins. "Her week is heavier than mine." Then she would straighten the labels, align the boxes, and breathe when finally the door closed. Every winter she knitted a scarf, always the same pattern, slow, steady, as if she were counting days. She stored them in a drawer she never opened. Spring always returned, but she continued. Habit could be a form of prayer. Some months were lean. The electricity bill buzzed like a dull worry in the back of her head. She would take an extra job, clean a hair salon after closing. The owner would linger, hand her a bottle of soda. "So, Miss C, everything okay?" "I'm fine," she would reply, rubbing a circle until the glass shined. "I'm here." Rumors traveled faster than truth. At the grocery store, 2 women near the fruit stand whispered, hands cupped. "She still lives alone. I heard she lost her job at the restaurant over some dirty business. Sad." Pause. "There are people who give until they have nothing left." "And then what?" Catherine pretended to examine tomatoes, testing their ripeness with her thumb, as if the whispers didn't reach her. They did reach her. She just knew how to carry the weight in silence. Years slipped by like sunsets, slow if you watch them, gone if you blink. The boy's face faded at the edge of her memory, but his eyes remained clear, steady, and bright. Sometimes when a teenager held a door for her, warmth rose in her chest, almost a laugh. "Look at you, look how you survived." Then the door closed. The day continued. One humid July evening, sleep eluded her. The air was thick. The fan creaked with a small imbalance. Catherine sat on the edge of her bed, pressed her knuckles, and listened to the neighborhood's breath. Music 3 houses down, a couple arguing softly, a distant siren. She got up barefoot, went to the kitchen, poured water, and leaned on the counter. The laminate was cool under her forearms. Her breath calmed. Autumn returned. The leaves turned like pages and fell. She raked them into small piles, slipped them into bags, stretched to loosen her knotted back. Across the street a new couple was moving in. Plants, paintings, and a bike with a squeaky wheel. "Hello," called the man, raising his hand. "Hello," she replied, a thin smile lifting the corner of her mouth. That week at the salon the barber told a fascinating story. A tech guy started from nothing who was now building schools. Names ricocheted around the salon like ping-pong balls, fast, excited. Catherine wiped mirrors, half listening, letting the words slide. School, children, good. She filed that thought with all the others. Then the air cleared, the first frost silvering the grass. She buttoned her coat, button by button, carefully. That afternoon the low sky was a tin lid. She brewed tea, placed the cup on the windowsill, and parted the curtain just enough to look at the street. A delivery van passed, its tires whispering on the wet asphalt. Further away, a sedan slowed, then drove off. Ordinary traffic, nothing more. She rolled up the last ball of yarn of the year, measured the end of the thread between her fingers, and closed the stitch. The room vibrated with small, soft sounds, the clock ticking, the fan's quiet breath, the clink of the cup settling on wood. She exhaled slowly. In the late afternoon, gravel cracked, more solid than the usual passage, a heavier engine, stable, settled. She didn't move at first. Engines were part of her neighborhood's backdrop, but her hand slipped to the curtain, lifting just enough fabric. Headlights swept the porch railing, sharp, powerful. A dark SUV appeared, stopping at the curb's edge. The hood reflected the dull sky. The engine purred low, patient, like held breath. Catherine's fingers gripped the curtain. She felt her pulse beat in her wrist, calm, measurable, not surprised, just present. She placed the scarf on the table, smoothed the wool once with her palm, and stood up. The radiator clicked, then went silent. Outside, the SUV's engine continued its patient murmur. She inhaled, slow and deep, and moved toward the door. The handle was cold against her palm, her breath misted in the air. Late autumn slid over her skin. The engine stopped. Silence swelled, broken only by the crunch of footsteps on gravel. A man got out, tall, impeccable suit, the kind you only saw in magazines left on barbershop counters. The door closed with a smooth, expensive click. He stood still for a moment, observing the house as if to imprint it in memory. His eyes, deep, steady, unmistakably familiar, finally fixed on hers. Catherine gripped the doorframe, her knees buckling. Where have I seen those eyes before? He approached, not rushed, not hesitant, measured, like someone carrying years of weight. Reaching the porch, he stopped at a respectful distance. Then his voice rang out, low, warm, tinged with something she hadn't heard in 10 years. "You don't recognize me, do you?" Catherine blinked, lips parted. The silver of his watch caught the setting sun. She shook her head gently. I I don't place you." He smiled, and for an instant she no longer saw the man, but the child. The same wide eyes she had watched grow each year, hungrier, the same silent nods at the end of the alley. "I'm the kid from behind the restaurant," he said, "the one you fed every day for 7 years." The world tilted. Catherine held onto the doorframe, her breath cut short. The alley, the paper bags, the napkins, the last note with her address, the boy, his trusting eyes, memories flooding back with painful clarity. "Oh my God," she whispered. He nodded, his gaze tender. "The note you gave me, I kept it. I didn't come then, I couldn't, I was barely surviving, but I swore that if I ever made it, I would find you." Her throat burned with tears she hadn't let flow in years. She made a weak gesture toward the door. Come in, please." Inside, the house seemed smaller with him there. His presence filled the air. He looked at the worn furniture, the pile of unpaid bills neatly arranged. He noticed everything, but said nothing. He only turned to her. "I made it. Technology, coding, determination, sleepless nights, and somehow it worked. I built something, people know my name now, but none of it would have been possible if you hadn't kept me alive. You never saw me as trash, you didn't care about my skin color, you just saw a child, and that saved me." Catherine's hand trembled, covering her mouth. "All I wanted was for you to eat, to make it through." He breathed steadily. "You did much more than that. You gave me back my dignity when the world had stolen it from me." The following weeks passed like a dream. He offered her a new home, bright, warm, without peeling paint or creaking porch. He launched a foundation in her name, which would keep her secure for the rest of her life. But the biggest shock came next. He opened an orphanage, brick by brick, built in her honor. Above the door, carved in lightstone, "William's House for Children." Journalists flocked to the opening. Cameras flashed as he stepped to the podium. Catherine, in a simple navy dress, sat in the front row, hands clasped on her knees. Her eyes filled with tears when he pointed to her seat. "If I'm here today," he said in a voice loud enough to silence the crowd, "it's because of her. She fed me when the world turned its back on me. She believed I had value when no one else did. She didn't look at my skin. She didn't ask questions. She simply took care of me, and that gave me the strength to survive." A breath ran through the audience. Heads turned toward Catherine. Some applauded, others wiped their eyes. Heat rose to her cheeks, her hands trembled. But this time it wasn't from exhaustion. It was heavier, richer, being finally seen. At the end of the conference, the orphanage children, with bright eyes, noisy, alive, ran toward her. They surrounded her legs, pulled on her sleeves. She laughed, a sound that surprised her. For the first time in years, Catherine's heart was full. Not with money, not with glory, but with simple truth. What she had given in silence was coming back to her in a way she never could have imagined. And so the food scraps carried in paper bags had become much more than survival. They had become seeds, seeds that had grown into a man, a legacy, and a home for countless children. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness survive the darkest years, because when Catherine fed a forgotten boy, she didn't just feed his hunger, she fed hope. If this story touched you, don't forget to click like and subscribe to Stories That Matter to discover more moving, intense, and surprising tales. Tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. We love reading your messages. See you very soon. Stay kind, stay curious, and keep following us.